call it the flap.
You say hi, Izzy? Are we in the garage? Yeah? Yeah. What are we doing today? Oh, steering. Because it's not a hot rod, I can't drive it. What's going on, guys? It's Mike, this old hot rod up here in Middleborough, Massachusetts. And I'm in the garage. It is Thursday afternoon. Got my motor set in place. I got the fan blade cut down, which you saw in the video on one of my last videos. I also got my wishbones pie cut and tack welded so I could get the proper angle of the wishbone. So then I could tack on my wishbone mounts, which are here. I put the nuts facing out. The reason for that is that puts the tie rod end on the inside, and that created more of a turning radius with the wishbone being forced further in instead of further out. I gained about 2.5 inches of turning radius. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get the steering column mocked up and potentially set in place. What I'll need to do is I'm going to need to cut the boxing plate that's on the inside of the frame rail on the driver's side where the steering column is going to go. Unfortunately, I'll have to cut the cut the top weld. I'll have to cut wherever it's welded here. These are my frame numbers here. But I'm going to have to cut this weld and remove this plate. Fortunately for me, it's not welded underneath yet, so I just essentially have to cut it up the sides and across the top, and that piece should come out. After I can get that cut out, I'll be able to get the steering column kind of set in place. I have a dashboard for the car, which this car originally was a 34 Deluxe because it had chrome windshield frame and a few other signs to show it was a Deluxe. This is a 34 Standard because there's no ashtray. That's okay, because I'm probably going to put gauges there anyways. I probably would have filled it. So this is an original 34 dash that I got off a friend down in Rhode Island. That's going to go in the car. I've had it in here before already, mocked up. So I'm going to get the dashboard set in place. And then I have a few different column drops. I think I have a couple of F1 column drops. I think the outer column shaft is the same size. If not, I have a few other aftermarket ones that I could potentially use. But I want to get the steering column set in place and mocked up. And what that will allow me to do is A, I can get potentially the pitman arm position where it needs to be. I have my drag link here that came on the car. Play my cards correctly, I might even be able to keep it in the position it's in. I don't know yet. If I can retain this, I will. If not, then I'll just make up a new drag link. I have a few other early Ford ones with the early Ford ends on them. But I just assume use this because it came with the car. But we'll see how that goes. If all goes well, I'm probably going to need to heat and bend my pitman arm. And after I get that taken care of, I'm going to have to heat and bend my steering arms. To do that, I'll remove the wheels, probably remove the braking internals, and just leave the backing plate on, and something I can reference the angles with. So yeah, that's the goal, is to get the steering complete, or at least to a point where I can mock up the steering, the column drop, get that in position so then I can start working on my firewall. And I don't want to put my firewall in until my steering column's in. I want to try this again. I've been out in the garage the whole time, but I started to film a little while ago and the camera died. And I don't know how long I was out here talking like an idiot to myself because the camera died and I didn't realize it. I just pulled out my motor and transmission. See, I have my headers mocked up, fans on there. The reason I took out the motor is because of that. I'm mocking up my steering. Now, that steering is from an F100, and a Ford F100 truck. It was a common setup back in the day. It's already been modified at some point in time. The mounting flange has been cut, torch cut. But other than that, it's a complete column. I have it already mocked up. Oh, watch out, Wes. I have it mocked up in the car, mounted the dash, and I had this old chrome steering column mount, this drop. I picked it up at a swap meet somewhere. I honestly forget where I got it, but I wasn't sure what it was for, and I just tried it to see if it would fit on the column, and it fit perfectly. And then I tried mounting it on the dash with zero modifications. Zero. None whatsoever. That thing mounted right up there perfectly. Not knowing if it's going to be the correct amount of drop yet, but it really should be, being a channeled car. Everything's lower as it is, and I don't think I really need to go much lower than that. So that being said, I needed to get the dashboard on so I could get the drop, and then the column mounted, so then I could find the placement of where my mounting flange is going to be. So my mounting flange it's going to be between these two marks. You can see these marks on the frame. What I need to do is I need to remove the plate that they used. I think Brad did it for the boxing plate. I need to cut straight up on both sides, and then across here where the plate was welded, it was welded on top of the frame. You can see it here. You can see this big thick bead of weld. They didn't clean that bead up because it's hidden, but from the cowl forwards on the frame horns, it's been cleaned up. Don't want to go too far because I don't know if you can see that, but my numbers are there, so which also match my title. So that being said, I need to remove this piece of plate so then I can inset the steering column or the box mount, and then figure out where my hole needs to be so I can drill a hole in the frame and I can get this mounted. I'm going to want to mount it as high as I can on the frame, and what that does is it actually lowers the angle of the steering column, and it actually drops the steering wheel down. I mean, you can look here. That's it down low near the bottom of the frame, and that's it towards the top of the frame, so it drops it considerable. The end of this shaft hitting the frame, this is actually hitting the motor, but if I were to measure from this to the inside of the frame rail here, it's a good 3 inches, so essentially I'm going to have 3 inches clearance. If that column drop was a sign for things to come on the steering, then it ought to be, hopefully it ought to, the rest of it will hopefully go nice and smooth. So I'm going to get you, whoa! Whoa, Wessie! Alright, let's get this plate cut out of there. Well, it's kind of in my way. But you know what, I'm going to prescribe some cleaner lines. Woo, slippery! That motor's leaking a little bit of oil out of the drain plug. What did I say I was going to do? I'm going to go a little further forward. Go there. Alright. Ha! Look at this. Ha! It's like finding a damn mouse nest. Look at this. I don't know what it was from. Maybe the old steering box, because what I was told was, or no, I'm sorry, I wasn't told this. From the pictures, there was a steering box mounted somewhere in this area. It was like, I want to say that from the pictures, the steering box was about 8 to 10 inches tall, and it had a 55, 56 Chevy steering box on it. So, oh, look at that, there's more. Got a whole mess of nuts and bolts and washers in here. So, not that they were going to hurt anything, but You know, kind of funny. That's what I was hoping to find. You know, nice and clean. Yeah, now I can get this box down here and figure out where my holes need to be, and I can get everything drilled. I mean, maybe I should have cut it back a little bit further, and I can always grind that weld down later and clean it up. No one will ever see it. But I can get this down in here now. Geez, it almost looks like this steering column was in a 33-34. The way it was cut off on the bottom, it fits damn near perfect in this car, in the frame. I don't typically have help. I always am trying to find a way to get things done myself, you know. Sometimes it's just more difficult than others. That's pretty much where I think it's going to be. And again, I want to check my door. I've got plenty of room there. My column is centered in my gauge cluster. See where the column flange is. It looks like it's going to be pretty good. I think it'll line up okay with that frame. If I have to maybe add a shim, that won't be an issue. Steering column's good. I can shut my door. I got good amount of room between the inside panel and the door. I mean, in the steering wheel. My column's in a good spot in relation to the speedometer, which that's going to get changed, but you know, you gotta work off your baseline. Steering wheel looks good height wise, so I'm gonna get the hole marked for the shaft for the pitman arm first. I'll get that hole cut, and then I will mark and drill my holes for the mount. So I'm gonna do that now. So you can see inside the frame, somebody already had a steering box mounted right here. In the pictures it shows like an elevated steering box when it was running a Pontiac motor. But this must have been an earlier addition to the car at some point in time. This top right hole actually lines up with the flange hole right here for the mount on this F100 column. So I'm going to re-drill this hole. It's been welded in, so it probably isn't going to drill all that easy, but I'm going to drill that hole out after I get this hole drilled. Just one size over what I need. The next size down doesn't fit over this steering shaft. The bit looks pretty good. I shouldn't have an issue cutting through this. So I'm going to get this ready to go and get this hole drilled out. Let me go grab my drill and fire up my compressor, and we'll be good to go. I still didn't grab my drill. Alright guys, I went back in the house, grabbed the camera. It died, so I had to go throw it back in the house and charge it up. I didn't stop working though, because you just can't stop. Steering box is still mocked up. I got a bungee cord and clamped on. I got no big nuts. See what happens tomorrow. I don't know what I'll get done, but steering box, pitman arm, tie rod I'm going to leave there temporarily until I can drop my steering arms on either side because of my dropped axle. Once I can get my steering arms dropped and in position where I need them to be, I can then build a tie rod to fit the car. And as soon as I do that, then I can get the thing steering. Alright, what I'm going to do now is work on the steering box. And like I had said earlier, what I need to do is I need to get the steering box to mount straighter or flusher on the frame rail. The shaft coming out of the steering box, the steering shaft, is at an angle, and I can't have it at an angle. It needs to be perpendicular to the frame but parallel to the ground. And at this point it's not, because the steering box is rocked this way. Inside the frame on the rear portion of the mount, there's about a 3/8 inch gap, and on the front it's flush with the frame. And then on the bottom, it's going to take me a little while to figure this out, but I need to push. The front of this frame needs to actually come out, so the whole steering box will actually sit flush on the frame. And what I want to do is I want to retain the drop on the column drop centered on the speedometer. You need to make sure you have enough room between the edge of the steering wheel and the driver's door, the window. You don't want to be turning the wheel and then hitting your knuckles on the edge of the door frame or the window frame. So just a lot of things that fall into place to make the car enjoyable to drive. And I want to make sure that I take my time and really try to hit my marks and do everything right the first time. I do not want to do this again, because doing this again typically means drilling more holes. And I really want to avoid drilling tons of holes. I don't know if you can see. You can see. You can see the angle of the pitman arm where the steering shaft comes out. It's not perpendicular to this flange. Flange is on an angle, so it's shorter here and longer here. And I need to compensate with that, for that angle, with the frame rail. And at the same time, it needs to be level. So it's going to be a little bit of a tricky situation, but I'll figure it out. You always do. Just got to figure out how to hold it. Alright, I'm going to try to attempt to figure this out, and I can't take the steering column off to do it. It's a good spot for that. Put as good as any. My bungee cord here to hopefully keep it from doing anything foolish. I know it's not much, but it really doesn't take much to hold these up, especially with the column drop installed. Alright, I think I'm going to make some measurements on this frame. I'm going to get my cutoff wheel and I'm going to cut the frame out. I'm going to get the steering wheel where it's supposed to be, centered on the speedo in the column drop. And then I'm going to kind of manipulate the metal, the flap or the flange I'm going to manipulate that flap probably with, hammer or monkey wrench, whatever the case is, pliers. I need to manipulate that and bend it to get the steering box to sit the way I need it to sit. Gonna make some measurements. I'm gonna get that cut out. All right, let's get. That is gonna be tough. This flange had to come out opposite, so if the back flange needed to come out, I don't think I'd be able to do it because it's right at the front of the cowl, at the edge of the cowl. But fortunately for me, that is not the case. I don't know if this is going to work. And I hate to cut a frame. Sometimes that's just what you need to do. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell myself, this is going to work. And it will. Because I'll make it work. Alright, I'll step this column back in here just to double check my theory. The front. The front needs to go out a lot more than 3/8 of an inch. I'm really nervous to do this. I'm going to go for it. Alright, well, let's get to cutting. Got my gloves. I'm going to grab my apron. Whoop whoop! The apron. Alright, and move the camera a little better of an angle on the dangle. Alright, so I'm going to cut 3 sides. Top, bottom, and down. I don't know how far back I'm going to be able to go here because it's so close to the body with the cutoff wheel. I may end up having to use a mini hacksaw, little air saw, and getting further back towards the cowl. So you can see I got that cut out, the 3 sides. I left the back portion still attached. I'm going to pound it out with the hammer and start shaping it to the shape and the angle that I need for the steering box to make it work. Let's get to work. I left my hammer up here. I think what needs to happen is the top needs to come out The front needs to come out and the top. Oh, that's right, I forgot. The frame is two layers. Well, that changes things. That changes things. I feel like I'm gonna get the "you're ruining the car" comments on this video. Clamp this. Hopefully I'll still be able to access it. I don't know exactly what's not cut through yet. Need to figure that out. So as you can see, I'm working on the frame section that I have relieved for the steering. I've created a flap to accept the shape or the angle of the mounting flange on the steering column. So now what I'm going to do is I need to get at least one hole drilled, at least this top hole drilled, because I want to be able to keep this steel tight to the flange. And then what I'll do is I got to be really careful because my frame numbers are right here. But then I'll fill this in, fill it in here and around the base, around underneath. I'll have to weld all this in and fill this in with a piece of metal. But what I'm trying to accomplish, I think, is going to work out fantastic. I have not seen this done before. And again, you don't always have to try to be different. It's just, this is how my brain works. This is going to give me more clearance for my exhaust. This eliminates a problem with the flange, having to cut this flange off and to buy a flange. You can buy a flange. Companies make flanges where you cut this factory flange off. You dismantle the box, cut the flange off, and then you re-weld on a new flange that is flat, or it just has a different angle, which corrects the angle of your column and everything. But if you leave the flange on and cut the frame, it essentially does the same thing, just different. I'm going to get a hole drilled so I can get a bolt through there. I think what I'm going to have to do is actually weld, I'm going to have to weld nuts onto the back of this flange. Otherwise, I'll never be able to get a tool in here to access it. So I got to put a nut through this side and I'm going to weld on, a bolt through the outside and weld on a nut on the inside of the flanges. And then I'll just be able to unbolt it and the column will come right out. So, it's time to get to work on marking a hole and getting a hole drilled. I'll try to get the center of it as close as I can to it. There's a bad bit. There's number 2. Oh boy, not looking good. Worst noise ever. Alright, so I was able to find a nut and a bolt just temporarily to hold that frame section onto the steering box. So I can kind of, like I said, make some marks, figure out exactly where I have to cut things so then I can reshape this frame section. I'm happy with how it's looking so far. I think it's going to work out okay. This is going to have to be heated and bent, but as of now I have perfect clearance for that pitman arm, whereas earlier I couldn't fit this pitman arm onto the shaft because of the angle it was sitting. It wouldn't allow it to travel all the way onto it. I'm going to French this in now. I just don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. Straight and bend this over so it's like a square bump, or should I shape it the shape of the frame? I think I'm just going to do a square bump. It'll be easier. It'll be more simple. It'll be cleaner, I think, in the long run. I don't think it'll attract your eye as much. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab a chisel. Chisel. I need to grab chalk. Friggin' chisel. Alright, that clears my steering box. Good. Alright, I'm going to hit this, clean up all this metal, and start making a template for these filler pieces. Start getting them welded in. Bottom's going to be a little tough, but I may have to do that when the car is lifted up in the air. I still have to weld underneath all the frame rails where the boxing plate is. So I'll do that, and I'll get all this done at the same time when that time comes. And then put the motor and transmission back in and see how all the clearances and everything are. Colonel Sanders, where are you? Alright, just making my paper template. Probably hard to see on the camera, but just using the dirty glove. Cutting it a little bit oversized, because what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to weld it flush with the outer edge of the top corner of the frame rail. But again, I got to just be super careful because my frame numbers are right there. These frames have a real sweep to them. And so it makes it difficult to mount these particular steering boxes. Model A's have a lot straighter of a frame. Alright, so that's going to be my first piece. Again, I think I got to just trim it down a little bit. Alright, that's good. Got it weld in there pretty good. Start trimming it down. Alright. That's number 2. And then I should be able to duplicate this to the bottom. More or less, yes, I can. Yeah. It should be good there. Yeah, the bottom's going to be a little different. Because the bottom of the flange is actually hanging out just a tiny bit. So I'm going to have to kind of roll. This is going to have to be thicker because I'm going to have to roll this underneath, and I'll probably go a little further down and maybe flush with the bottom of the frame. But I can at least weld. I can get this tack welded in place, the top and the side. Alright, so I'm going to find some steel, cut a couple pieces of steel, and make these patches. That, my friends, will work. Tools everywhere. Alright, well, I mean, I know I'm going to need to add another bolt on the bottom, but I have clearance on the inside of the frame between the frame and the steering box. I have clearance here for the pitman arm, and once I get that all welded up, I'll get it shaped up and rounded off. I'll get this little space cleaned up here where it meets the frame, and I think it's gonna look pretty good. I think it's gonna be a nice solution to a pretty major problem, to be honest with you. So let me get this piece here made, and then I'm probably gonna call it a night after that. I'm getting a little tired. My knees are starting to bother me from being squat down on them for so long. Race motocross in the 90s and well into the 2000s. I still ride to this day. I actually rode today. Try to ride at least 1 or 2 days a week, and my body has paid the price. My knees being one of the examples of that. Alright, get this cut out. Well, that's about as good as it's going to get tonight. I'm going to throw the pitman arm and the drag link back on. I want you to get a good look at what it looks like. That's it. I'm happy with it. I still obviously have underneath to patch, but for now that will work. So you can see how extreme of an angle that flange is. That's exactly how it sits. So I have about 1/8 of an inch clearance between the steering box and the frame rail. And I will need to address this area here with a plate. I'll reinstall a piece of plate there. I'll maybe put a few tabs with a couple of nuts inside that I can remove this to access this bolt. And yeah, a lot of cleaning up to do. That was a productive evening. I'm happy with that. So like I said, now I can throw my drag link and my pitman arm back on. And what's nice now is this angle pretty much follows straight right to the steering hoop, which is what you want. You want it to be in as straight of a line as you possibly can get it. Let me put you back up here and I'll throw this pitman arm back on. Alright, well, now at some point I'll run and grab a bolt, pinch bolt for this here. There's only one bolt holding it in, so it's clearing the frame. Perfect. It's exactly what I needed to do. I still have to, like I said, this bolt's too small for the hole. I gotta get a larger bolt here and the bolt on the back also. That'll suck that in a little bit more. And then I'm going to weld the nuts. I'll weld the nuts on the back of the steering column so I can through bolt it this way. And that'll be that. So I'm happy with that. Like I said, productive evening. Thanks again everyone for following along. I appreciate everybody's support. I enjoy getting emails from the viewers and them showing me their projects and the different things that they're into and the cars they're building, or the motorcycles or the bicycles that they're into. They see I have old bikes hanging from the ceiling. My girlfriend and I take those every year to Trog down at Wildwood. So I enjoy that, and obviously other things. So yeah, productive night again. Happy with the end result. Got a little bit of buttoning up to do. Tomorrow is heat. We're going to heat and drop steering arm, both steering arms, the steering hoop, and we'll probably modify the pitman arm, bring it in a little bit tighter to the frame. After that, going to mock up my headlight stands, cast aluminum stanchions for my headlights. I'll get the second bolt drilled and mounted for my shock mounts. After that, I'm going to work on the firewall. I think a couple of more days. I think probably like another 2 days of mechanical work on the front end. I should be pretty much ready to move forwards with working on the firewall. And that'll be nice to see that come together. That's, as far as the exterior of the body, the firewall is the last piece of sheet metal work that needs to be done. Clearly I know I have all the floors to do. That's just a whole other process. I don't really include that with the outer portion of the car. But if I can get the firewall in over the next, let's say within the next week, which I think that's realistic, that will it'll kind of wrap up the outside portion of the body work, or the sheet metal work. I'll be able to drill the holes for my motor mounts and finalize all the holes for my transmission mount. Yeah, so once the firewall's in, I can start marking up my floor pans, the bracing for the floor, my transmission tunnel, figure out seat placement, shifter linkage. I'm building my own shifter linkage. I built my own linkage for my 30 coupe. I figured I might as well build my own linkage for this car. Old early Ford shifter handle, like a swan style handle. I don't know if it'll flex too much with the 4-speed versus an early Ford 3-speed. So we'll see what I'm going to come up with for a shifter. Yeah, just things just evolve on their own. Things just kind of, the car tells you what it needs each step of the way. So I'm going to get things cleaned up. I got a lot of tools to put away tonight. Thank you again. I appreciate everybody following along, watching, supporting, the comments, the likes. I call them down thumbs. I think that's what other people call them. Hey, you can't please everybody, and that's just an ongoing lesson in life. So I appreciate the down thumbs, because that means those people are watching the video too. So yeah, it's very humbling in a short amount of time, the amount of subscribers that I have. There are people that have followed along. So thank you again, and I'll see you soon. Things are really starting to shape up. Things are coming together. If you follow along on Facebook, you see daily updates. I don't post videos, I just post pictures as I go, same as Instagram. So if you want to follow along on Facebook, the Facebook page is This Old Hotrod. Just do a search, it'll come up. Give me a like, follow along, daily photos. The videos, I'm probably a couple weeks behind on the videos, so by the time a lot of people see this video, there's already so much that has happened. And the things that are on the video that people are commenting saying, hey, don't do this, or you should do this, those are done together. So again, I'm really pushing to have this car driving in the spring. I don't really see any reason why I shouldn't. And I'll be able to, I think, get all the mechanical stuff done, get you know, the paint done, and just really be able to fine tune things and get things exactly how I want it. Maybe find some old parts, maybe find some, you know, vintage stuff that fits with the car. That's the fun stuff. You know, once the car is built and it just screams at you and tells you what it needs, that's the fun part. And you get to really kind of be creative and yeah, just appreciate it and take it all in for what it is. So thanks. The car originally had a stanchion on top of the driver's side frame rail. Because of the size of a 389 Pontiac, it's a big motor. There was no room to run a steering box. So he built a tower on top of the driver's side frame rail and mounted the steering to that. The steering was 55-56 Chevrolet truck steering. That's the column, and you know, the whole unit came out of a 55-56 Chevy pickup. So that was kind of what came to mind. That was the easiest way for me to do it. A lot less engineering involved with bumping out the frame than it would be to cut the steering column down, clock the flange, re-weld it, rebuild the column. There was really no need for me to do that. That column is perfect. I don't even plan on rebuilding it unless I absolutely need to. It's super tight, it's smooth. So again, there's really no reason for me to pull it apart. So that's why I kind of didn't want to go that route. I wanted to find a solution, and that was the solution I came up with. So thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great night. See you soon.